bring you greetings from the Primate's World Relief and Development Fund. And when I speak in churches across the country and there are younger people, I explain to them, and a lot of people don't know what the Primates Fund is, and about once a year we get a call or a letter in asking questions about how we work to conserve apes and baboons and chimpanzees. So I want you, the primate is a person, and you know the primate. And the primate is also the president of the Primates World Relief and Development Fund. We've been very gifted to have him as the president these last few years. Jose Zarate behind me is the Canadian Indigenous Communities and Latin American Development Program Coordinator. He has the longest title in PWRDF. PWRDF, and I should ask you to try to say that fast several times, but I won't tonight. PWRDF, PWRDF, PWRDF is a ministry of the Anglican Church of Canada. It is one of the ministries. It's separately incorporated. It is the Anglican Church of Canada's Relief and Development arm, part of the hands that reach out. I'll say a little bit more about that later. We have on our board, we have 14 people on the board. One of them is an Anglican Council of Indigenous Peoples appointment to that board, and that is Tom Morrison, who is Catherine's father and was at the First Sacred Circle. The vision of PWRDF is for a truly just, healthy, and peaceful world. And usually I ask people to say that back, because it's a very easy thing to share with our children and our neighbors and friends. A truly just, healthy, and peaceful world. I don't know anybody who doesn't want that. Our mission for PWRDF is to respond to emerging humanitarian crises, to carry out long-term development work, and engage in education and advocacy. So our mandate is primarily international in nature. Other parts of the church work at mission within Canada, justice issues within Canada. Our mandate is primarily international, but we do have a Canadian Indigenous program. And that's why Jose's here, along with supporting me. We work in 22 countries, more or less, depending on what kinds of emergencies are before us. Two today that just came in is that the Canadian government has said that they will match funds for emergency relief in the Sahel Desert, where there are increasing famine conditions, and also there's very, very bad flooding in the Philippines, and we've had some calls from our partners. Excuse me. I think I'll let you, what we fund in long-term development, humanitarian responses and emergencies get in the newspapers, so we're a little more familiar with that. When the Primates Fund was first started, it was started because Canadian Anglicans were trying to respond to the coal mining disaster in Spring Hill in 1959, and at the same time they were trying to respond to refugee issues in India because of famines and droughts there. And people came together and said, we could do this better if we worked together on this. So for the first 10 years of its life, the Primates Fund was called the Primates World Relief Fund. And then it didn't take very long to understand that often there were systemic reasons for emergencies and crises happening, whether sometimes, as you all too well know, the emergencies and crises are man-made. And so what was required not only after emergencies but before emergencies was long-term sustained development work in communities. And so in 1969, the Primate's World Relief Fund added "and development" to its name. We understand our experience and what we do as working in edge habitat. As I left home, my husband said, "Oh, you're at the Wilderness Edge Retreat." I said, "Oh." Edge habitat, and I'm sure all of you have words for it that would greatly expand what it means, is that space between two ecosystems. It's a biological space where, in my own experience, having grown up on a farm, or a very rural farm, it was what it reminds me of is the hedgerow between the forest and the plowed field, and there's a hedgerow in there, so that's what I think of. But the edge out here is the sand beach and the place in there. That edge space has more species in it than either ecosystem on either side. But it's not, well, it is home for some people. But species who come in from the outside, there are issues of survival because it's not the place that they call home. And it's always a place of loss and grief because not everyone survives. It's always a place of control and power and authority because no one has that decidedly in that space unless they take it. But it's also a place of great joy, of great vulnerability. It's the place where we experience death and birth and life and new possibilities. And as you know, as we sit here, it is a place where we gather at the edge, in the edge, and find joy and possibility and strength and courage because we come together. And what we know at PWRDF is that we all live in that space, but our partners are the ones who really have found out how to survive there with joy and tears and weeping and laughing and extraordinary strength to find creative ways to live. So one of the things, I think in the biblical stories, the stories in Samaria are the ones that teach us about how to live there. And I think Samaria is where Jesus taught his disciples about leadership. I'll just throw that in. So the question that PWRDF is asking of all of its projects is, how does what we propose to do support vulnerable and suffering people to become agents of transformation in their own and their communities' lives? If you look at the gospel stories, Jesus always asked people to become agents in the story. It isn't, let me do this for you. He's always asking the hard questions. He's always asking people to stand up or to come out of the crowd or to say what they need. How does what we propose to do support vulnerable and suffering people to become agents of transformation in their own and their communities' lives? And that's what we want to be about. I'd like to make two invitations on behalf of PWRDF, and I bring greetings from the board and the youth council and staff and people who are across the country who work for PWRDF. We would like to invite one of your youth to sit on the PWRDF Youth Council. There's a space there, and we hope that someone can be named. We want to walk with you. May we do that, and we will follow your lead. Sid and Norm told me to talk from my heart. And so I think what God has been saying to me, and certainly not to me alone, is do not be afraid. They were afraid on the water. They weren't afraid of the contrary winds. They were afraid of what they thought was a spirit, and it was actually Jesus. So they were actually afraid of Jesus, which is so often the case when we don't see who Jesus is, and then right there, what we were most afraid of is the answer. We see Jesus in our partners all the time. And very thankfully, they see Jesus in us sometimes. And then the other thing that I have to say was in prayer this morning, what the verse that kept coming was, let your light shine. Don't hide it under a bushel. Let your light shine before people so that you may... where's Bishop Sue? Could you stand up? I say this because then I went to breakfast and there she was. And could you turn around? Yeah. I can't read that. Let your light shine before others, that they may glorify your Father in heaven. PWRDF sometimes is quiet about its stories, and sometimes we have the best stories in the world because there are people who are changing their own lives and their communities' lives, and we don't need to be quiet about that. And I think you need to let your light shine. I think that word is for you. Thank you very much. Miigwech.